Okay, I guess that we can get it started. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar of the computational from organized by the Computational Social Science Lab at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. And today, the speakers is our colleague, Professor Han Siqi from the Sociology department. I will briefly introduce Professor Han. She's an assistant professor of sociology at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. Her research focuses on knowledge structure in higher education, school-to-work transition, and labor market skill returns. And most of her current works are related to big data analysis using computational methods. So her work has appeared in many prestigious journals like Proceeding National Academy of Science, European Sociological Review, Journal of Marriage and Family, and others. So today she will present a very interesting topic about the school to work transition and using big data. Specifically about using unstructured text data using combining the computational methods. So without further ado, so let's welcome Professor Han.
Thank you, Professor Liang, for this nice introduction. So as Professor Liang introduced, I am an assistant professor of sociology at CHK, and I affiliated with the CSS lab here. And I'm proud to present something related to my work at the CSS lab. Let me start the PowerPoint. You can all see the PowerPoint with the sea and the sand, right? Okay. So the title of the talk is School to Work Transition in Big Data. Of course, this is related to my own research agenda. I work in sociology of education and the sociology of work, especially the part where it connects to education, that is the school to work transition. So I studied several topics, including STEM education, non-cognitive skills, and income inequality. Most of these prior studies that I had used the conventional data that everyone is quite familiar with, that is the survey data. So how did I come to the area of computational social science? This is because I started to notice that there are certain research questions that the traditional survey data cannot answer. So keep using the traditional data sets may limit the questions that I want to ask. So what are some traditional classic questions that were asked in sociology of education? So here I listed two of them. Do lower class students have a lower probability of entering top colleges compared to higher class peers? Another one about behavior differences and the feedback that they get from teachers. For example, are Black students evaluated as less well-behaved by teachers than white students? And if so, what are the negative consequences? So you can see that both questions are really about between group outcome differences, right? However, as most people focus on the between group differences, there's something that has been neglected largely. That is the experiences. What happened in the process of education, rather than just the beginning and the end of it. So when we focus solely on the access and attainment, as most people have been now, then we just neglected what's in the middle, what happened in between. Why do prior research largely neglect the process in between? I think there are two reasons. The first one is that most quantitative scholars in this area believe that this kind of questions can be left to their qualitative colleagues to study with their fieldwork and ethnography. So why should they care about the process if it can be done in an ethnography? The second reason, more importantly, I think, is that at the time there is simply no suitable dataset or methodology that quantitative scholars could use to address questions like this. But now I think it's time. Can quantitative researchers open the process experiences black box? I think the answer is yes. So in the research I'm introducing today, Han et al. 2023, we want to capture students' interdisciplinary experiences. So this is about an experience. We want to define what is an interdisciplinary education. So how did prior researchers define it? Some captured the joint employed faculty members. How many of them hold, for example, a sociology and an anthropology employment at the same time? Others capture it with the number of interdisciplinary research centers. How many such research centers does the university have, which can also be an indicator of the interdisciplinary education. Some also capture students' curriculum activities, such as their internships or community engagement experiences, which is considerably different from what they experience in their coursework. But most of these prior approaches to capture interdisciplinarity, as you can see, are organizational features of a department or an university, not related to student experiences directly, and more specifically, their learning experiences directly. To really delve into their learning experiences, we need to look at the basic element of learning. What is their learning experiences? Of course, they enroll in courses, they take courses. So how do we look at the courses to capture their interdisciplinary experiences? That's the question. As you can see, the courses that students take in college are unstructured textual data. These are made up of text, not numbers. And because of that, there is no predetermined variables, such as gender, race, and class, the ones that we are most familiar with. There's no such structure readily available in the unstructured text. So that is why it's called unstructured. So the researchers, us, have to construct variables out of the unstructured textual data with some natural language processing techniques. And lastly, the feature of the unstructured textual data is that it is very large in scale and usually they're online. So we will have to scrape it from the websites in certain ways, which I will introduce later. The benefit of using this big data and other natural language processing and machine learning and so on, these new techniques, is that it truly improves the prior approach to study the curriculum. We are not the first group who study college curriculum, for sure. There is a subfield in education studies that really looked at curricular design and so on. In sociology of education, there have been a few studies that look at course materials such as textbooks, exam papers, and so on. But these prior studies suffer from a few shortcomings. First is that they only study a limited number of materials. For example, 100 textbooks or a couple different exam papers and so on. And with this small scale data set, they also use human reading and hand coding to understand these materials with traditional analysis methods. So once we have this assumably very big data of millions of course materials, the benefit is that it will enlarge the breadth of application. So here is a quote from Evans and Foster's paper, Computation and the Sociological Imagination. So they said when compared with traditional social statistics, big data and machine learning methods have one great richer breadth of application. They embrace both structured and unstructured data of many types. And when applied to social data, they can lead to surprises and new theory building. So let me come back to the importance of this research question. What is an interdisciplinary higher education and why does it matter? How can it be related to new theory building? We situated this question in a heated debate that is about the value of liberal arts interdisciplinary education. So needless to say, you must have noticed that there is a worldwide decline of liberal arts colleges and the liberal arts component in universities. Most of the people who are against a liberal arts education said that, first of all, only prestigious families can put their children in a liberal arts college. So that's educational equality. Secondly, even all students from different social classes can have a liberal arts education or a degree in a liberal arts sector. The economic returns does not satisfy or does not match with the expenses they have spent on the tuition and fee. It's expensive education, but doesn't guarantee economic returns. That is what most people who are against it said. So the question is a interdisciplinary liberal arts education really have no economic value? If so, should we just let it die as it has been dying in many places of the world now? So that's a very practical, relevant question that we hope our research could answer. So as I said, we are not just using a few textbooks or a few exam papers. We want to collect as many as we could. By analyzing the massive amount of course materials, we hope to look for cross-institutional differences, which kind of schools are better at promoting an interdisciplinary education for their students and which are less able to. And if there is such an institutional variation, what are the economic consequences? So most people have already understood that liberal arts education or interdisciplinary education have really positive cognitive or learning returns to students. They become better learners. They have better cognitive outcomes. But in addition to that, does it have any economic values? That is what we're trying to look at. To refresh your memory, we want to build some sort of quantitative measurement of interdisciplinarity out of the textual data, the unstructured textual data. And we do it with two kinds of course materials. One is called course catalogs, where you probably have already known that if you go to a course catalog website, for example, CHK's course catalog, then you can see all the departments and all the course offerings. Each course is one or two paragraph of description saying what this course is about. This is one type of data. The other type of data is the syllabi. As college teachers, we all have written one. This is more expanded version of the course description. You must describe it with a few paragraphs on the objectives. And then you will assign, for example, readings. And you may also include what kind of assignments, what kind of final, and your office hours, and so on. So the former type course catalogs, we believe, is not as deep as the course syllabi. We tend to believe that the course catalogs are the claims that schools and departments make. So they want to show that, okay, we are positioning ourselves like this. We are offering this and that course. And they can claim that they are very interdisciplinary in the course catalog. But it is in the syllabi or in the real classrooms that teachers practice their interdisciplinary. So the upper one is more oriented toward the interdisciplinary claims. The latter one is more oriented toward interdisciplinary practices. And we will see a result related to this practice versus claim contrast soon. So this is the project I was affiliated at Columbia University when I was a postdoc. It is called Measuring the Liberal Arts. It was founded by the Mellon Foundation. And we spent a lot of time doing this data collection of the massive amount of course contents. So first step is to do the web scraping. So there are certain schools that use static web pages and other schools that use dynamic web pages to show their course contents. We used the two different Python packages to deal with these two different kinds of web page structure. So the steps, I don't think I need to spend a lot of time on it. So we just go to the web page and then we look for the HTML elements where the paragraphs of description were situated at. And we pass the class name of this HTML element to Beautiful Soup or Selenium and let it extract for us. And then we look through all courses in the department and then in the school. So here is an example. This is a course I offered at CHK called Sociology of Science. And this is the course catalog that CHK offers to students and everyone who wants to see it. There is a section called description, highlighted in blue here. And if we hover our mouse on this paragraph, right-click it, inspect, then the lower panel pops up. You can see there is a span item in the HTML. And under the span item are the text, exactly like the text you can see under description. That is the part that we want, and we write code to script it. And we do it for all courses and all departments. So in that way, we turned the unstructured data to a structured data like this. This is just an Excel board that we see every day. It has the structure, as you can see. Similar to the survey data, where every row is a respondent and every column is a variable. Now, every row is a course, and every column is a variable, which is a feature of that course. So you can see the yellow highlight is the description that I just scraped. And we scrape it for a lot of courses, of course. So there are other features for every course. For example, the school's name, Tufts University, which here it is, the school, the faculty, the subject, and subject code, and so on. Course name, credit, prerequisite, and so on. So we tried to keep as many features as we can keep, as shown in their web pages. So not just the description. So this is a very short introduction of a lot of work that we did to collect and clean the data. So with the whole data set cleaned, then we can move on to construct this numeric index for interdisciplinarity. So every course would eventually receive such a value of this index, and we can aggregate all courses in the same department or department in the same school to get department level interdisciplinarity or school level interdisciplinarity. But the first step is to do the course level, right? So I am going to call it from here on the inter-D index because interdisciplinarity is a very long word to pronounce. So I'm just gonna call it inter-D index. So the intuition of constructing this inter-D index is not very difficult. A more interdisciplinary course is one that is semantically similar to a more dissimilar set of disciplines, while a more disciplinary course is one that is semantically similar to a more similar set of disciplines. This is a tongue twister, but it's not very difficult to understand. So let me show two hypothetical courses first. The first one, we can compare the content of it, which is the few paragraphs that describes it, to the corpus of three disciplines: sociology, anthropology, and history. There's a course 2, and we compare it to 3 different corpora for sociology, computer science, and biology. I intentionally assign the same cosine similarity scores to the 3 fields. So they both receive 0.80, 0.65, and 0.38 for the 3 disciplines that they are compared to. You can see they have same similarity to sociology, which is 0.80, right? But they have they are associated with 2 different other fields. Course 1 is to anthropology, history. All 3 associated with course 1 are social science, and their distances between each other are not very far away. But for course 2, the other disciplines that it is associated with are computer science and biology. These are hard science or STEM majors. It's further away apart from sociology. So the second course satisfies our definition of what an inter-D course is. That is, it is similar to a dissimilar set of fields. But the first course is similar to a similar set of fields. So this is the intuition of how we construct the inter-D index. Of course, we cannot only study the similarities between a course and 3 disciplines. We actually studied the 20 most common disciplines across institutions. And you can see they include not only social science, but also science and humanities. So I listed in our paper the 20 fields here. And these are 2 real courses, not the hypothetical ones anymore, the course A and course B, taken out of the real data that we collected. You can see the course B here. It has a similarity score moderately high for anthropology 0.13, economics 0.16, history 0.8, political science 0.14, and sociology 0.22. So it is similar to a number of different fields, unlike the course A, which is most similar to 0.39 anthropology. And other similarities are all very low. So the second course, course B here, is more interdisciplinary than course A. Oh, just to mention, these are both anthropology courses to begin with. But the second one not only is similar to anthropology, but also to other fields. So mathematically, we expressed the way that we calculate this inter-D index in this way. But to put it short, we first calculate the course to discipline consent similarity scores, and then we weigh it by the discipline to discipline distances of similarities. So if a course, again, is similar to a set of disciplines that are similar to each other, then it doesn't make it very interdisciplinary. But the course that is similar to a set of dissimilar disciplines, that make it more interdisciplinary. So we weigh the above scores of course to discipline similarities with the discipline to discipline similarities. But even if we have constructed the course level inter-D index, that's not the end of it. Because students, when they're in the same department, same schools, can still take different courses. So they are exposed to different course taking portfolios. So we cannot assume that if they are in the same department, their interdisciplinary experiences would necessarily be identical. That is the reason why we also want to simulate some randomness into their course taking experiences, especially the elective courses that they could take. This can vary greatly. So to do that, to simulate some randomness in their course taking experiences, we first need to know what courses are they required to take. So how many credits are in their major, how many credits are in their, for example, general education, how many credits are in their free electives, and so on. But it is very, very difficult to do it in large scale. So for our paper, we have to do it for 1,600 departments and schools. We need to look for their course taking requirements one by one, which is very difficult. So that is why we use the help of ChatGPT. Actually, we use the Bing version, Bing GPT, not the OpenAI GPT. So we used it to help us go through all the 1,600 department schools webpage and find where the course requirement description is at, parse it, and save it back to a JSON database in our local machine. So here you can see this is not an easy task, and we need to write a very long, complicated prompt to do it. So this is written by my co-author, Jack. He said prompt-based provide the requirements for a certain major at a certain school. So these 2 fields are going to be looped through all the majors that we collect, all the schools we collect, and provide only the required only requirements for the major itself, not the entire bachelor's degree, blah, blah, blah. So he actually tried a lot of times what should be said in the prompt so that it will give us the accurate information rather than other irrelevant or inaccurate information. So he asked for and the courses required and in the major courses and out of major courses and a lot of like required STEM courses and so on, right? But even with this, as I will introduce later, it will not give us 100% correct data. So this is a cautionary note that I want to mention as early as possible. So we should not trust this data completely, even if it returns us 1,600 rows of data. But with this prompt, we can gather how many credits of the 3 electives that we need to simulate into every student's course-taking trajectory so that it will not be identical students, no variation in the same department. Now, assuming that both steps have been achieved, first, we have inter-D index for all courses. Second, we have variation at each department school. Then how can we then answer our stratification question? That is, does interdisciplinary education have economic values? We need to merge this data to first, school ranking, second, student earnings at that school. So this can be collected from traditional channels such as NCES, College Navigator, College Scorecards, and so on. These are all American database that they maintain and update regularly at the school level. So every school can have, for example, average earning returns, the student composition, the SAT enrollment line, and so on. So these are all collected by official statistics that we can merge. And we use the US News ranking, the most commonly used ranking for the schools to see, to measure the school ranking. So the first major finding that we have is that only in science, the STEM majors, but not in social science or humanity majors, there we can see schools with higher level of curriculum inter-D help the students gain higher economic returns after graduation. So why is it only in science that students benefit from interdisciplinary courses? We reason that it could be because for most employers in the labor market, they see the science majors as very specialized set of workers. They may not expect them to be very interdisciplinary, especially to be very familiar with all this other non-STEM soft major knowledge. But if they do, they may stand out and make employers admire them, appreciate them more, so that they get more successful in the labor market. But the social science and humanities, the employers may have different expectations because these 2 areas or divisions, they are not very specialized or technical to begin with. So this is our guess, but we cannot verify it because we don't have interview data. So we don't know what happens in the interview process. But we think it may be because the stereotypes that employers impose to the STEM majors. But when they break the stereotypes, they stand out, and maybe that can help them give more economic returns. So this is the first piece of finding. The second piece of finding is about this prior mentioned claim versus practice difference. So as I said, we use the course catalogs, the simplistic description of the courses that everyone can see, the short ones, as only the claimed level of interdisciplinarity. But we use what actually happens in the course, represented by the syllabus, as the practice level of inter-D. So for the same school or the same department, they can have 2 values, and the 2 values can be different. The practice inter-D and the claimed inter-D, and they are indeed different. We find that it is one thing to claim an interdisciplinary mission in your courses, but it is another to actually practice it. Our results show that elite schools, meaning schools with high rankings, claim higher levels of inter-D than non-elite schools. So in their course catalogs, there's more inter-D than in non-elite schools course catalogs. But if we move on to the syllabi data, and we can see there's no such ranking differences. The practice does not differ between elite schools or non-elite schools. So it seems like the elite schools are more good at claiming inter-D, but in practice, it's not that different. So this is the second main finding that we had. And this has been covered in Times Higher Education, as it is quite relevant to higher education, as we can tell. And it has been published in PNAS last year. However, there are a number of shortcomings of this study that we are trying to address in our other projects. The first is the selection of the sample. So we studied 80 schools and 20 disciplines. So that gives us the 1,600 combinations of disciplines and schools. But obviously, this is not the whole universe of possible disciplines and possible schools in the US. Why did we not study more disciplines? That is because in different schools, they always name their programs slightly different. So maybe here it is called biostatistics, and there it is called biochemistry and statistics, and so on. So there are so many variations of the same program or similar programs with slightly different names, making the disciplines extremely difficult to make consistent. So you can see the 20 disciplines that we have are the most common ones that we believe 90% of schools would offer, rather than this applied or mixture of discipline programs that maybe are very unique to a small sum of schools. And similarly for the schools, we tried our best to have 20 schools in every subgroup. So we divide the schools into 4 subgroups: higher or lower status ones, and research university versus liberal arts colleges. So this is a 2-by-2 classification of schools. And we put 20 in each group, simply because the time limit, we cannot scrape endlessly every school's data from the website. So this is the sample selection issue that we are trying to overcome in our other upcoming project. We are expanding the sample size. And the second, as I have already mentioned, is the GPT data correctness. So sometimes when it goes to the web page to scrape something for us, it returns NA, empty. Maybe it can either because there's no such information indeed, or because it fails to scrape something that existed. Similarly, if something doesn't exist, they can make up data, which is, I think, growingly more noticed as a big shortcoming of GPT-assisted research, not only by us, but also by other researchers in different disciplines, something that we really need to pay attention to and find out ways to correct it. And lastly, when I talk about the earnings, actually the earnings are at the school level. So it's aggregated earnings for all students graduated from that department school, not every individual student's individual earnings, right? And also, as I said, we simulated randomness into the student course taking trajectory. That is because we cannot legally gather their transcript for 1,600 different programs. That is why we have to simulate. But now, there are emerging data sets that offer de-identified transcripts of college students at a few different institutions. This is a collaborative work with Michigan, UC1, and a number of, I think, 7 to 9 different universities that they are collaborating to make their transcript restricted access. so that if we can gather all the courses taken by real students, we merge it to the course descriptions in their schools. Then we can do it at the individual level and merge it to individual earnings. Of course, that's something that we are doing now. With all these shortcomings, let me introduce the upcoming project that also study school to work transition with big data. Some are related to this Pinus paper, some are not. So I will only introduce 3 of them. First is a recombinational concept network. Second is a gender representation in course readings across disciplines. This is also using the syllabus data, as you can tell. The third one is moving away from school to work, because my title of the talk is School to Work Transition. So also I would like to introduce some part of the work related to the work side of it. Analyzing skill portfolios in online script job posting. So the first one, recombinational concept network, is based on a theory that I have already hinted at when I constructed that entity index. The theory is called recombinant innovation theory, prevalent in management literature. It says recombining 2 distant, seemingly unrelated bodies of knowledge can be a source of innovation. So you can imagine a suitcase and wheels, and some smart people put the wheels under the suitcase, and then it becomes the suitcase that we have now, rather than a bag without the wheels, and maybe a car with the wheels. So this is to merge the wheels to the bags to become a suitcase. A very simple example of recombination. Before the suitcases emerged, we only have the bags, and we have to carry the bags on our shoulder, right? But the recombinant innovator find a way to put the wheels under the bag so that it becomes the suitcase and greatly save our human power in carrying things. So if we use this kind of insights about how innovation emerges, and we observe in college curriculum, how can we see whether a course or a curriculum is more recombinant or not? Can we see that? And can we visually demonstrate that? Can we demonstrate this recombinant knowledge network? The answer is yes. So in our book chapter, accepted by this book called Advancing Measurement of a 21st Century Liberal Arts Education, we have practiced this recombinant process in a semantic network. So the process of doing it is first to find 2 distant concepts, just like a bag and the wheels, right? Now we found 2 concepts that are distant. One is embodiment, the other is organization. So usually in the same course, you would not teach them together because they obviously seems to be quite irrelevant. But what if a course or a curriculum can actually teach them together in the same course? It will show that they are connected in a semantic network. And for curriculums that can connect them, we can see in the network there's a larger component, not partitioned into 2 separate components. But in curriculum that cannot do such kind of recombinant innovation, then the 2 separate concept components will remain separate. So what we did is we find relevant concept clusters for embodiment and relevant concept clusters for organization, and we plot them in a semantic network like this, and we see if the 2 clusters are actually one big cluster or are they remain separated clusters. You can tell that on the upper left is a typical example of integrated curriculum, that these 2 concepts and their similar concepts are recombined into one big cluster. While on the lower right and the upper right as well are examples of the 2 concept clusters remain separated as clusters. It is no wonder that the upper left one is higher status liberal arts colleges. It is the mission of this kind of schools to offer integrated interdisciplinary curriculum to their students. So there's a higher chance that these unrelated concepts can be recombined in their curriculum, more so than in other kind of schools curriculum. Of course, we are not only doing it for these two concepts. We have process to list all concepts from the disciplines that we have. And then we do a random pairing of all concepts that we can do. So we have a lot of pairs of concepts, not just one pair like this. And we bootstrap the process, doing it for 100 times, 500 times, and so on. So we can get how large a cluster is and how many clusters we can get from every sub-figure like this. And the results are consistent. We find that higher status liberal arts, they always give us a more recombinant or a more integrated semantic network, regardless of what random concepts that we pair, regardless of how seemingly unrelated these two concepts look like. So this we find exciting. Another relevant project ongoing is about gender in STEM using the syllabi data that we have. So gender in STEM, especially women's underrepresentation in STEM, is not a new topic at all. It is a very common topic in sociology of higher education. A lot of studies explore why just women cannot catch up with men in the STEM majors. Some of this, including my work, tackle with this issue. So I listed two of my prior papers here. One is on gender transition to adulthood by field of study, and the other is on STEM expectations across a number of different countries using the PISA data. Including my own research, we are dealing with how to help women remain in the STEM pipeline. But there are certain shortcomings in this prior research. That is, we still fall into the old conventional way of doing research. That is, we did not really look at what happens in the classroom, what is their learning experiences. We just look at outcome and look at the group differences. So here we can try again with the syllabi data. Could the exposure to different teachers and different readings in college classes be related to female students choosing or not choosing STEM? Especially since I mentioned both the teachers and the course readings. As we all know, the course reading, every reading has an author. Every author can have his or her own gender, race, identity. So are certain teachers more likely to assign certain kind of readings? So we especially distinguish whether the reading is a female authored reading or a male authored reading. And that is coupled with whether the instructor is a male and a female. So you can see here is a demonstration. This captures the correlation between the percentage of male authors in the whole discipline. You can see the x-axis here. And how is that related to the predicted proportions of male authored assignment, reading assignment, meaning in the course? So the hypothesis is that maybe in a more male-dominated field, there are more male authored readings to begin with. So of course, there will be a positive correlation here. In where the discipline, for example, physics, a lot of authors of the papers or the textbooks are men. Then students or instructors will have to give more readings that are male authored. That's no wonder. But if we separate the instructor gender, female or male, you can see there's still a difference. Given the same level of proportion of male authors in the discipline, male instructors assign more male author readings than female instructors. Notice that is given the same level of disciplinary male authorship. Still, male instructors assign more male authored readings. Why is that important? That is because we believe maybe when the female students see that, okay, even in a very gender segregated field, I can see female authors, there is an inspiration, or it predicts that if I work hard enough, if I'm talented enough, I can make it in this discipline. But if I see as a female student, if I see all the readings are all white men, assuming, then how can I imagine myself doing it? So we believe there may be such an effect that seeing a female authored reading or seeing a higher proportion of female authored reading could be a role model effect for the female student in female underrepresented fields. And we are exploring this possibility in a larger scale. And this is just a snapshot of what we have found. And lastly, analyzing skill portfolios in online job ads. This is the work side of it. In our era, especially in this GPT era, what skills can survive? How can employees today accumulate the skills that can help them be advantageous over a long time, not be beaten by the GPT's challenge? So different scholars from different disciplines offered us a lot of explanations. Some believe that cognitive skills and analytic computation skills are still very important. These scholars belong to the SBTC theory camp, the skill bias, the technological change theory, which is very prevalent in economics and to some extent in sociology. Other scholars believe that, okay, these are hard skills. We need to also emphasize the soft skills, such as problem solving, perseverance, risk taking, and so on. So these soft skills in sociology, we call it non-cognitive skills. Including my own research, we looked at whether non-cognitive skills are important, and also are their importance different across different groups. So this paper that I wrote myself looked at whether the returns to social emotional skills are different dependent on student SES, the socioeconomic status of students, and whether the same non-cognitive skills that are rewarded in school continue to be highly rewarded in the workplace or not. Because what the teachers believe are important may not be the same skills that the employers believe are important. So this discrepancy, here I call it incongruence, is very interesting to study. But studies like this, like my own study, still suffer from a shortcoming. The shortcoming is they treated skills as independent from each other. And I believe this perspective is outdated. Skills are actually organically interrelated to each other. So when an employer hires an employee, it doesn't mean that he or she hired an employee just for one skill. The job offer that employers offer they look for job candidates that have a composite set of skills, not just one skill. In the famous Kunha and Heckman paper, they claim that skill begets skill. Improving one skill may lead to the enrichment of another. And the same skill, if they combine with different other skills, they may give the employee very different economic returns as well. So all of this point to the importance that we should not just study, for example, separately a computer skill level, cognitive skill level, non-cognitive skill level, but we need to double check the mixture of them in a skill portfolio. We need to distinguish skill portfolios and how the difference between skill portfolios would eventually lead to different economic returns. So what kind of skill portfolios would give us higher economic returns? This author on Harvard Business Review believe that a generalist skill portfolio would be more valuable in the future. And this fits with my prior introduced recombinant innovation theory, right? To be recombinant, you need to have different kinds of skills. That makes you a generalist. And in the foreseeable future, a lot of tasks can be replaced by the ChatGPT. So then for as humans, we may need to become more generalist rather than keep being the specialist. However, our educational systems are not yet set up to foster more generalists, but we are still using a very disciplinary kind of view to cultivate our students. So not only asking can colleges produce generalists, but I also want to ask what kind of employers demand generalists. Accordingly, that will lead us to the question of how we define a generalist job. So this essentially is a demand side and supply side story. We have known enough about the supply side. We look at the workers' skills a lot, but we have not looked at the job skill requirements enough, especially because we are trying to measure the generalist jobs. We want to see if we can quantify the diversity of skill requirements at the job level. This is strikingly similar to my idea of quantifying course level interdisciplinarity. Interdisciplinarity is essentially itself a diversity measure, right? Here is another diversity measure at the job level. So with my colleague Siqi Han at NYU, we are submitting this paper using 10 years of near universe collection of job postings from the US to examine how different types of jobs demand diverse skill portfolios in the description of their requirements. Again, this is another type of big data and textual data because we first gathered the job postings from online, which is unstructured text, and then we get the skills out of it. We vectorize the skills in a multidimensional space like this. Then we can see whether two skill vectors are closer to each other or more distant from each other. And the result here makes intuitive sense, as you can see. Engineering skill, information technology skill, they essentially are similar skills, related skills. So the angle of their vectors are not very big. But if you compare engineering and personal care and services skills, then the skill distances of the two vectors are really large. So if we scale this up for every skills, for every job, we can do pairwise skill distances of all skills that a job requires, and we average the distances to get an index of skill diversity for the job. And then we aggregate the jobs at different sectors of the labor market to see whether every worker, if they have higher skill diversity, that necessarily means they have higher economic returns. So because we have 10 years of data, we can also capture the trend of it, whether all jobs are increasing in terms of their skill diversity or not. So it's not uniformly increasing, despite we are in a very tech-driven world now. There are three typical occupations, sectors that we see larger speed of increasing in their skill diversity. One is management, second is professional, and lastly is the personal care and service. So the unexpected one is the personal care and service. We all believe that these are bad jobs. The managerial and professional jobs are good jobs. So no wonder they have increasing skill diversity. But we also clearly observe that personal care and service are increasing in terms of their skill diversity. So this is something interesting that we want to explore. So we further explore whether, given the same level of skill diversity of the jobs, the personal service and care work would necessarily get the same economic returns as another job in management or professional. So by our common sense, we would know that maybe that's not the case. Because, for example, for a lawyer and a social worker, a lot of the things that they do are similar. For example, they both have to use communication skills. They have to use persuasion. They have to use a lot of other, social emotional skills. But the returns are just very different between them. So based on this common observation, we merge this data to American Community Survey, where we can gather earnings. And we see that lower status but highly skill diverse jobs in personal care and service do not have as high income regions as the similarly diverse jobs in the other higher status sectors. So this satisfies with the storyline about job polarization. Although here we are capturing the effect in terms of skill diversity, not the other commonly examined type of job polarization. So looking forward, what do I think is, well, my humble opinion, what is the future agenda for sociology of higher education and work? So in terms of research, of course, one big task is to gather more data to examine questions that were previously unable to be answered. So I will offer an example of Cornell's pathway project. Pedagogical is another area that we could improve because this is sociology about education. So as practitioners of higher education, as instructors in a university, what can we do? So with my colleague Ken Lee, we have a granted project that looks to develop a gender-conscious AI-assisted chatbot for learning social statistics. So we're trying to incorporate AI to help students design their own assignments or grading or doing more innovative things so that they can combat their anxiety about learning statistics, especially for girls. And lastly, I would like to offer examples of industrial usage of big data. Using Harvard Kennedy School's the workforce almanac. So let's first see the Cornell project. They are applying this AI assistant in course selection. So here is their website. So full disclosure, I'm not advertising for them. I'm unrelated to either project, neither the Cornell one or Harvard one. I just find them interesting. So the Cornell one is that if you go to this website, if you are their students, to begin with, you go to this website, it will give you this kind of things. So you can verbally describe what is your major, write about the reasons why you want to study something, and write down what you are interested in learning. So you give the AI the input, and then they will give you, based on all the prior historical data of the Cornell students, what kind of recommendation of courses that they recommend you to take that will fit with your interest and your career development plan. And of course, it can give you more personalized recommendation for the pathways that you could choose to follow. So maybe in the first year I take these courses, and then next year I would plan to take those courses. Eventually, it will guarantee me a higher success rate. Well, that's my expectation. That I think that's their hope, that students can make wiser choices in their college years. So this is like a personalized tutor or advisor to the students based on the prior historical data that older cohorts took the courses. A very good application. The second one is that we all understand that the administrative data are very, very hard to obtain. Data like the Cornell course taking data, of course, is not available to us. So if we don't have the access to administrative big data, what other things can we do? Here is a practice, this Kennedy School's project. It looks at a gap between job openings and job seekers, given the current situation of occupational segregation, skill gaps, and so on. So where do we find training opportunities for the employees? This is a question that both the employers and the employees concern. So they actually have collected and mapped 17,000 providers of workforce training in an interactive map. And this data is all actually public data, but they recombine it to satisfy this novel need. So they said we have combined major publicly available data sources to create this new big data set, which is referred to as a novel data set. But the goal of it is to ensure that the data set is a public good that others can also utilize and verify the data sources. So what they have produced is something like this. an interactive map with the GIS, I believe. So you can see county level, state level, blah blah blah, where you can find what kind of workforce training for your future employees, and for the employees to find the training so that they can prepare themselves for a future employer. So I think this is also a very good demonstration of what big data can help the school toward transition. So with that, I would like to end today's talk, and I welcome your comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Han, for the wonderful talk. So now's the time for Q&A. So any question from the audience? Yeah, Eric.
Well, first of all, thank you for the very wide-ranging presentation that you got, fascinating set of research agendas, interlinked research agendas, and I found it very stimulating to listen to. So I actually was, furiously taking notes as you were doing, because I had so many questions arising. I've been trying to sort of distill those into a few. So I'll ask Professor Liang to please protect the audience members from allowing me to go on too long, but I do have a few questions I'll try to raise, or comments raised succinctly. One is just, this idea of measuring the interdisciplinarity by looking at the comparison between disciplines, right? And the connectivity, in a sense, between different disciplines, which makes sense, intuitively. However, as you're presenting, I was thinking the two disciplines that I'm most closely affiliated with are economics and urban planning. And so I have fairly, deep exposure to both, but these are very different in terms of their nature. Economics is a very kind of inward-looking discipline. And in economics, you're doing almost nothing but economics, and it's very tightly tied together. So it's very disciplined in the original sense of an academic discipline, right? You kind of really focus and define kind of limits and apply yourself in a sense, a kind of a narrow way and deepen. Whereas urban planning is actually kind of has its roots less in kind of discipline, a kind of in the academic sense of the term, and is more has its roots in professional practice. And it's, professional practice relating to cities, and cities themselves are bundles of everything, right? And so the nature of the so-called discipline of urban planning entails studies of building design, urban design, physical infrastructure, of economics, of sociology, of equity, and of a whole range of issues that in themselves kind of mimic this sense of interdisciplinarity that you bring in. So just kind of raise that as something that might be useful to bear in mind as one interprets one's results, that I'll say no more about it, although, I'm sure it could engender an interesting conversation in itself. A second point that I want to raise is just about this, you were focusing on, the supply side and what are employees looking for and the role of interdisciplinarity in that. It brings to mind just a kind of an anecdote that just I observed in my own work, because I did work as an urban planner. I worked for City Hall in Vancouver before I, took my academic job long ago. And one of the things that I noticed, not only at City Hall in Vancouver, Canada, but also even in the university, or that I realized is true of organizations, say large organizations, almost of any kind, is that a lot of people who were at the entry level were kind of hired for their kind of, I'll call it narrow skill set. So we need someone who can, design these, the sewer infrastructure. We need someone who can do computer programming. We need someone who can write these kinds of reports, whatever, do the accounting, et cetera. So typically at these organizations, at least this, again, this is just my own kind of casual observation, but I think it may have some broader applicability. However, what I noticed as a kind of general rule, again, just from casual observation, is that the people who rose in the organization, that the higher one moves in the organization, the more one spends one's time communicating to people outside that organization about what the organization is doing. So when I was hired at City Hall, I was kind of down, at the lower levels as a kind of a specialist, and I would spend talking. But by the time you get up to the city manager level, the city manager is explaining to the world outside the city what is going on within the city. So there's that kind of natural sort of self-selection that might take its place over time. One implication of that for the kind of study that you're working on may be that if you're looking at entry level, and those are the kind of data that tend to be available, right, is the entry level salaries, those might be kind of misleading in terms of the longer run trajectory. So just kind of a thought on that. A third point I wanted to make, or just kind of observation, was, I really like, the idea of, you're going in and looking at the syllabi and developing, sets kind of similarity based on textual data. It reminds me of some of the work that I'm doing now, and that actually with Angel Ju and others, based on the recent workshop we had, CSS workshop we had, I was very excited because one of the presentations was looking at the application of AI tools to examining the 5-year plans. The person who presented that, PhD student who presented that, was looking at provincial level plans. But I myself, with a colleague at Hunan University, we've had several publications that look at 5-year plans at the municipal level. And so I'm very excited about the possibility, and we're actually moving ahead. We're actually going to be meeting with Angel, my co-author, and I, to sort of think about how similarity indexes sort of between the 286 prefectural level cities in China that we might determine sort of clustering methods based on these kinds of AI approaches. And so I find that to be very exciting. So just as an observation, but I was thinking about, well, where might this go and how might we test this? And I have an idea I'll toss out, which I just thought of as you were making your presentation, but I'm quite excited by it, which may say more about how easily I'm excited and less about how good the idea is. But the idea is that might be interesting to take these AI methods for doing these textual sorting and take a whole massive sort of database of text from books and just start and ask the AI to sort these into similar books and to see whether what emerges might map in some meaningful way to the Dewey Decimal system for that back in library science. So it's probably 100 years old or more. The Dewey Decimal system, before the advent of computers, was a method by which librarians would sort of organize books, and apply different numbers. Books that were similar had similar kind of numbers, right? It might be 3 was, I don't know, maybe social I don't even remember what they are, but some broad category. And then 3.1, 3.2, 3.3 would be subcategories within that. 3.21, would be even a narrow category. And so that's a kind of exogenous reference that one could use to sort of test the ability of these AI textual sorting tools to discern the same similarities that were implicit or actually quite explicit in the creation of the Dewey Decimal System. Now, that's not to say that the Dewey Decimal System is correct and any deviation from that is a failure. It might even be that AI tools could be used to help uncover things that the Dewey Decimal System missed. Nonetheless, it seems like a fairly fascinating kind of an approach, that there's something there that serves as an exogenous reference point that is meaningful, and using that as a start. And then my last comment, and again, sorry, going on so long. The other thing that's implicit in this, and I know that a lot of the people who are here listening are PhD students in the program, and many of whom are thinking themselves about, what does this mean for them, right? What does this about how they might sort of apply themselves while they're in, studying under Professor Liang, studying under Professor Han and others, and thinking about how they go out and become successful in their own jobs. And I think there are all kinds of interesting sort of ideas and suggestions that emerge from the research, but I would also like to provide another perspective on this, which is that as valuable as this research is for helping us to understand what's going on out there and where we might think about how we design curriculum and how we design school to work transitions and all of that, at the individual person level, my own additional advice above and beyond that to students would be to not spend too much time trying to game the system, trying to figure out, well, if I do this or if I do that, I can maybe get an edge this way or that way. And you kind of lose yourself. There's a danger of losing yourself in that. And that, in a sense, that finding questions that really, and finding research that really is meaningful to you, and that you feel in your gut, you feel in your heart is valuable, and it's something you sort of believe in, then, do that and see where it leads. And, I could give some examples, even in my own life where, I did things that made no sense whatsoever by any sort of logical judgment, and they were some of the best, quote unquote, mistakes I ever made. They just led to wonderful outcomes for me that I couldn't have imagined. And so I'd like to add that just as a kind of individual, kind of centric perspective for each person, within the context of the fascinating research kind of questions that you're presenting. And again, sorry to go on for so long.
Okay, I enjoy these questions. Let me address them one by one. So the first one is about your experiences of engaging with economics and urban planning, and you said that urban planning is more, essentially, it's not so inward-looking discipline as as economics. So I think the method that I introduced at the beginning does not really is not going to be affected by how diverse or how consistent the discipline is, because to capture the discipline to discipline distance, we actually use the same way as the course to discipline similarity. It's just to compare their corpus. so regardless of what exactly are in the economics corpus, so what exactly are in the urban planning corpus. So if you believe that urban planning can be sort of similar to economics in certain ways, but different in other ways, that will be reflected in the cosine similarity. It may give you a moderately high, but not really high cosine similarity. But for example, I am engaged with both sociology and anthropology. Then if you compare these two disciplines corpora, then they will be pretty high, maybe higher than I can imagine, but higher than economics and urban planning. So there in the paper there is a figure 1, I believe, which is a heat map of discipline to discipline similarities. So all the 20 compared to themselves and the rest 19, and you can see which pair of disciplines are more similar or less similar. I think it makes intuitive sense. So it doesn't matter what discipline it is, it just is applicable to all disciplines. The second question about entry-level workers are usually more narrow, and then when you move on to the senior level, you become more broad because you connect to the outer workers more.
And there's sample selectivity in that, right? It's not that you move up. The people who move up are those who have that capacity.
Exactly. I think in sociology there's a literature on it. It's called typecasting, right? I don't know if it's related only to sociology or other fields too. So in AJS, the American Journal of Sociology, I think there's a very good paper on it. So first, people have to specialize because they have to survive. They have to have their own niche at the beginning of their career. And when they move up, they have more freedom to broaden their expertise or to pick up a new expertise, to upgrade their skills and so on. So I think it's a very natural process in many industries. And yes, I think we can distinguish whether a job is an entry level job or a higher level job in the job as data. So I think that's a very good angle. The third question is about comparing this AI sorting of books to the Dewey system of sorting. I think that's also doable. I don't know if you know there is this a platform called Goodreads that people can rate the books that they read, and it will give them a recommendation of similar books. In China, there's Douban, right? These are two similar platforms that give recommendations of books. So if we really want to conduct such kind of research, what we can do is first gather the Dewey classification system, and or try to find some sort of library category that uses the Dewey system. We can compare what kind of similar books that it gave us to the one that is on Goodreads, because that one is algorithm driven, right? This one is Dewey system driven. So if we can compare the sorting of books, we can even visualize them as networks, book networks, totally.
One difference may be, as I understand it, some of these recommendations are not based on a textual reading of the books themselves, but saying, oh, people who read that book also read this.
Also want to read.
Right.
This is the co-reading system. Yes.
Yeah. So it's a I mean, both have value, but they're different things in my view.
Yeah, that's true. Those are based on co-reading. This is based on the essential content. Yes. But I think it's a very interesting comparison. Just when you settle down what it's exactly going to be compared on.
Right.
Because there are two systems, as you said. And the last question about whether we should encourage students to all do interdisciplinary education, my answer is also no. I think the paper's audience is more toward the educators. So how can we design our curriculum so that it can benefit the students? But for students, I think they need to, like our second question, that is that they are the entry level, so they have to find a niche first. And once they have gained certain status and experiences, they can broaden. Maybe that's a better career pathway or advice to it. Yes. Everyone should follow their heart to do what they are really interested in. And thank you for your questions. I think there are some
Yeah.
textual questions in the chat box. So Alexis Young,
Alexis,
thank
do
you
you
for
want to ask it directly? Oh,
okay. So the first one is I have a technical question about the first research. How to determine the score on each discipline of one course? What is the score? Through a topic model to predict for it. Still about the first research, when talking about graduates' earnings, there is always a problem that better school attract better students. How to prove the correlation between high entity and high salaries? Okay, so the first question, I assume this score is the cosine similarity. I assume that is what he or she is asking. So cosine similarity is a typical thing that people use to compare the similarity of two texts. So it ranges usually it's between 0 and 1. The higher value it is, the more similar two texts are. So if we want to determine whether a course is more similar or less similar to the discipline, then we first get all the course materials for the discipline, make it a corpora for a certain discipline, and we compare individual courses to that, so that we can get this so-called score, if that's what you mean. Not a topic model. Not a topic model. We didn't run topic model. The second question is, can we rule out the influence of better schools have better earnings? Yes, we control for all the common control variables, such as the school ranking already, and then SAT score when students enroll. So the selectivity of students, how large is the proportion of poor students who need financial aids, the teacher-student, faculty-student ratio, which you can see it affects teacher quality, and so on. So most of the available control variables we control for. So that, I think, sort of rule out this confounding variable about better schools attract better students, so selectivity of students. So yeah, so these are the answers to your questions. Thank you.
any other questions? I have okay. Go ahead.
There's another.
Yeah, yes. Probably the last
Oh,
question.
Professor Ishida. Nice to see you here.
Nice to see you.
I expected.
Yeah. I just have one clarification question and sort of a little bit more detailed question. The earnings data you had, did you have it at the school level or school departmental level? That's a very simple question.
Yeah.
Okay, and then I understand that you eventually would like to uncover the decision-making process among students in order to link their interdisciplinary exposure and the earning potentials. I think that's what you eventually would like to do. And in order to do that, I know that you don't have an individual level data. So it's a little difficult to link that to decision-making process, but I was wondering whether you can do a bit more using the existing data you have at hand. For example, some schools have a wider range of majors are available for undergrads. I mean, the Columbia, you had an example, but for example, Columbia has, in addition to history major and sociology major, they had something called history sociology major, which was a very popular major because that was a kind of pre-law school. Those people who are interested in going to law school would love to take that major. But that's a sort of example of if you have a major indicator to distinguish schools by the composition of department major in terms of interdisciplinary diversity. This is just one example, but I was wondering whether, since you already have the great data sources, can you gain a little bit more mileage out of looking at the school department composition or other measures to put into your analysis?
Yes, thank you for your questions. The first one, actually, we have the department/school level. So these are in the college scorecard data set. They have so post-graduation year, 1 year after graduation and 2 years after graduation. Only these 2 time points. of the departments, but they are missing certain departments do not offer it. So it's not 100% non-missing data. So certain departments in certain schools do not offer their earnings data. So that leads to the second question about not being able to do the student level analysis. There is a chance to do it now, as I said. So there is the College and Beyond 2 dataset that is at the ICPSR. I think it's limited access, but we were involved in this project when we were doing the LibArts project. I think Peter Behrman is involved in that dataset. So they have already collected, I think, 7 schools transcripts. Of course, they identified to be merged with a alumni survey. So 10 years after the students graduate. So we can see their links and we can see their other attitudes and so on. So that's one possibility. And the second possibility that you mentioned is to capture the composition of majors at each school. I think that's a very good direction to go. Still, my question would be if they all call it slightly different. So for example, the historical sociology program in Columbia is called history, blah, blah, something, something in Cornell. Then we will have to find a way to know which is comparable to which.
Yeah.
But I think if we do, I think totally it's doable. Just we have to find a way to innovatively measure it. What is a more complex composition of majors? What is a less complex composition of majors? But I think that's a very good idea to try.
Well, it's a wonderful study, and I'm very impressed, and look forward to learning more. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that now it's almost 11 o'clock. I guess that let's thank Professor Han again, and thank all the questions. Okay, hopefully to see you next month in June.
Great.
Okay, see you. Bye.
Bye-bye.